The cold was absolute. Not the kind that bit at flesh or froze water, but the kind that stilled time itself. Silence pressed against ancient steel and ice-packed stone like a forgotten tomb had swallowed the world. Then came the hum. Low at first, almost reverent, like the whispered breath of gods awakening something they once feared to destroy. A beam of thermal plasma cut through the frostbitten chamber with surgical precision, casting long blue shadows across the cryptic rune-marked walls. Beneath 30 meters of Arctic permafrost, the Zarkathi expedition team had reached what they believed was another extinct vault from Earth's final age. They were wrong. The sarcophagus wasn't built for ceremony or burial. It was a container, a lockbox, not for treasure, but for a storm. Alien claws, elegant and armored, reached forward and pried open the final seal. Mist hissed. A body lay inside, encased in a cocoon of silver mesh and faded tactical armor, its insignias long eroded. One eye slowly opened. It was blue, so blue it seemed unnatural, almost radioactive against the dark. The heart monitor spiked. A breath was drawn. Rattling, hoarse, alive. Commander Dorian Knox had returned. High Ordinator Threx tilted his angular head and recorded the data. Life signs confirmed. Human, approximately 47 solar cycles at time of stasis. Remarkable preservation. No visible degradation. "He's conscious," one of the subordinates whispered, eyeing the human's twitching fingers. "Should we secure him?" Threx ordered. "Protocol 7. We interrogate before we dissect." But Knox sat up before they could reach him. Slowly, deliberately, the movement wasn't sluggish. It was practiced, like he had been expecting this exact moment for centuries. His gaze swept the Chamber 6 aliens, 1 plasma cutter, 3 drones, 4 surveillance eyes. Then it stopped on Threx. "Where's the war?" Knox asked, voice like gravel across bone. The Zarkathi recoiled. Language processors chirped and blinked in surprise. The Terran tongue was thought to be dead, its grammar studied only by fringe xeno-archaeolinguists. Yet he spoke it fluently, confidently. Threx responded, artificially modulated through translator nodes. "There is no war. Terran. You are an artifact, recovered, that is all." Knox smiled. "It wasn't pleasant. You're lying." One of the smaller Zarkathi approached with a restraint band, careful to avoid direct eye contact. Knox didn't resist. Not yet. He let them guide him to his feet, let them escort him out through corridors carved by machinery that didn't exist when he was last awake. Above them, Earth was not the Earth he knew. It was colder, emptier, cleansed by time and catastrophe. Oceans had frozen. Forests had vanished. Cities were ghost scars buried under snow and silence. The orbiting Zarkathi research vessel Komorak Null waited with sterile patience above the ruins. Knox was taken into containment, fed nutrient slurry through a tube, scanned head to toe, blood sampled. He endured it all silently, until they asked the wrong question. "What was your function in the Terran military?" Knox looked up from the table, his restraints held firm, woven from trifilament energy thread, capable of containing a micrograv reactor. His eyes shimmered with something primal. "I wasn't part of the military." Threx's translators glitched, confused by the tone. "Explain." "I owned it. That night, or whatever passed for night in orbit, strange anomalies began to ripple through the vessel's systems. Minor at first gravity fluctuations in isolated corridors, encrypted com chatter and dead frequencies, maintenance drones rerouting on paths no one programmed. Then came the dreams. Zarkathi crew members, particularly the younger ones, reported vivid mental disturbances. Visions of ancient human battlefields, of trench lines and firestorms, of voices whispering numbers that didn't match known languages. Knox never left his cell. But the cell was changing. One of the bioengineers reviewing his scans noticed an abnormality. His cerebral activity wasn't just high, It was expanding. Neural density increasing over time. Synapses firing in clusters that should have led to seizure or collapse, but the human remained stable. More than stable. He was improving, adapting, like the stasis had evolved him. His DNA wasn't static, it was active code, rewriting on a timescale faster than the most advanced Zarkathi I-cores. Threx dismissed the concern. He is one. Earth is dust. Whatever weapons he once knew are fossilized. This is a curiosity. Nothing more, but privately he wondered. And in the cold hours of simulated sleep, he dreamed too. He saw a sky burning red. He saw metal giants standing over cratered moons. And he heard a voice, not human, not Zarkathi, but something older. You have woken a revenant. Pray it does not remember everything. The ship's I tried to purge the dreams, failed. Then Nox spoke again unprompted. Where is the Iron Choir? Threx froze. That term hadn't been spoken aloud. It hadn't even been in the scans. What did you say? Nox smiled again. The same expression, patient and dangerous. You think I don't know how this ends? Threx stepped back. For the first time in his long service, the alien scholar felt something ancient creep along his armored spine, fear, not of death, but of awakening something the universe had tried to forget. They had found a human. They had revived him. And too late, they were beginning to understand. They should have let him sleep. Asterisk, the ship drifted over a dead Earth, its polished hull casting shadows over glaciers that had swallowed continents. From orbit, the world below resembled a shattered relic, a husk of what it once was, buried in ice and silence. But aboard the Kamarak Null, silence was becoming a memory. Whispers traveled in corridors where even static should not exist. Crew efficiency dropped by 17%. Sanity metrics flickered in the red. And deep within the ship's most secure wing, behind 20 layers of containment, Commander Nox sat cross-legged in his cell, watching the wall like it might speak to him. He hadn't moved in hours. The Zarkathi were used to fear, used to inducing it. Across 100 subjugated systems, their empire had burned down civilizations with logic, precision, and overwhelming force. But none of their conquest prep manuals accounted for a prisoner who smiled at power readings that should have made his skull rupture. None explained why surveillance drones observing Nox tended to short-circuit after less than 90 minutes. Nor did they know why 3 separate attempts to sedate him with species-adjusted narcotics had failed completely. One medic swore the serum boiled inside the syringe before it even touched his skin. The Zarkathi called humans primitive, fragile, emotional. They used to laugh at ancient Terran war footage, charging into battle with kinetic weapons, bare skin, exposed, shouting oaths to invisible deities. But this Nox, carried none of the clumsiness they expected. His silence felt deliberate, as if he knew exactly how much time he had, and how to make the most of every second. That was what disturbed them the most. Not the power, but the restraint. Threx called an emergency analysis meeting. 21 specialists joined, flickering in via holochannels from various corners of the Zarkathi Dominion. The session was brief, clinical, and haunted. There is no record of this particular human designation. Threx began, claws steepled. Commander Nox, no mention in any pre-fall Terran archives. Genetic analysis confirms he is 100% Homo sapiens, but several strands show post-evolution anomalies. Mutations? Asked one biotechnologist. Engineered ones, Threx replied. Another specialist from the Dominion's Cyberpsychology Division brought up a new concern. Since his revival, the AI core has developed irregularities, self-audits failing, logic loops freezing. Most notably, Sector 7 his wing now returns encrypted packets that match Terran military hashes from 608 years ago. Impossible, Threx said. Terran data rot would have destroyed those centuries ago. That's the thing, the psychologist replied, voice dropping. to a whisper. It didn't come from our side. No one spoke for several seconds. Meanwhile, back in the cell, Nox stood. The lights flickered twice. A simple code, on off on. He smiled again, subtle, sharp, and spoke into the empty air. I know you're watching, Threx. You ever hear of a stress test? There were no mics in the room, no speakers either. But in the command deck 3 levels above, Threx heard those exact words whisper across his console. Not through the ship's audio system. Through his helmet. For the first time in his life, Threx removed it. The Zarkathi tried to regain control. They initiated isolation protocols, walled off at eye functions, moved Nox to a suspended gravity self-free floating containment. Yet within an hour, a janitor drone spontaneously redirected its path, opened a storage locker no one had used in months, and began carving the Terran word AWAKE into its own chassis using its welding tip. 27 crew members witnessed. Its 7 resigned on the spot. One began scratching his eyes until restrained. Still, the High Command insisted everything was under control. Earth was dead. Humans were dead. This was a fluken echo, a fragment of a bygone age, but strange patterns began appearing across other Zarkethi ships in orbit. Faint signal spikes. Phantom signatures mimicking old Terran vessels. Warped radio fragments playing archaic Earth music. One song repeated across 3 ships before they disconnected all long-range receivers. A somber melody of violins and drums. One of the crew translated it, though no one asked him to. It was called TAPS. When they reactivated long range scans, they found a ping coming from the dark side of the moon. No emissions, no propulsion. Just a stationary signal that hadn't existed the day before. Coordinates locked to a crater designated Obsidian Mare. It pulsed in binary. Bring him home. High Command ordered the site bound from orbit. The moment the order was given, every gravity generator aboard the Kamarak Nul shut off simultaneously. For 4.3 seconds. Just long enough for a dozen crew members to experience vertigo. Just long enough for a containment override request to appear on the main screen, labeled with an ancient Terran clearance code, REVENAN, T-priority-AEON-tier.no. One knew what the clearance code meant. But Threx, for the first time, did not deny it. He simply stood still, staring at the message. Who the hell is he? One officer whispered. Threx turned slowly. He's not a soldier. He's not a prisoner. He's a message. A message. To who? To everyone who forgot why the stars once trembled when Earth went silent. And as if on cue, Nox raised his head in his cell. This time, no lights flickered. No technology failed. He simply smiled and sang. A low, guttural chant. Words in an extinct Earth tongue that hadn't been heard in 6 centuries. And yet across the ship, dozens of audio receivers, some inactive, some unconnected, sang it. With him, the crew scrambled to stop it. They failed. And somewhere in deep space, far beyond where any Zarkethi dared tread, a Terran signal beacon flickered to life. Earth had whispered. And the stars had begun to listen. The stars over Earth had not spoken in centuries. But now they screamed. It started with a ripple, so subtle that most ships didn't even detect it. A gravitational hiccup, lasting less than a second, spreading outward from the Obsidian Mare crater like a breath exhaled from the moon itself. By the time the Kamarak Nul registered the distortion, 12 other Zarkethi vessels in high orbit were already adjusting trajectories, recalibrating sensors, trying to make sense of a signal that shouldn't exist. On the null, panic was still held in check by pride. But that pride cracked when one of the junior technologists stumbled into Threx's command chamber with shaking limbs and dilated pupils, clutching a portable scanner. We didn't detect the source correctly, sir. It's not just a signal beacon. Threx turned to face him. Speak clearly. The young Zarkethi swallowed. It's a command key, broadcasted with old Terran encryption. It's waking things. Up? Things? Threx narrowed his eyes. The technician transferred the data. The ship's main screen flickered with distorted ancient glyphs of Terran military codes, not seen since before Earth's fall. They mapped across space, like constellations pulsing in red and gold. Several matched records of defunct orbital platforms, others of deep space arrays assumed to be non-functional ruins, but one in particular lit up with unmistakable clarity. Project Grendel. No one in the room had ever heard of it. Nox had. He watched. From his cell, no, from his throne. For it no longer felt like a prison. The walls hummed with data, vibrating with familiar frequencies. Terran code was waking in the circuits of his mind. The stasis had done more than preserve him. It had bound him to the architecture of Earth's lost empire. Status report, he muttered. A single word buzzed back through his spine, through the metal and light, an echo from Earth's old defense systems. Partial systems online. Protocol Grendel initiating. Awaiting final directive. Nox grinned. Meanwhile, the Zarkethi made a fatal mistake. They doubled down. Fleet Marshal Arax of the Dominion's 7th Expansion Armada arrived in system with a dreadnought formation and declared Earth a strategic liability. The decision was swift and without debate, full orbital sterilization. Not just the Arctic ruins, not just the moon, but the entire planet. Strip mine the biosphere, torch the ice, burn the bones. Nox was notified by accident. A data leak, they thought. A slip. But it was no mistake. The ship wanted him to know. He stood again in his containment cell and whispered a single word into the quiet. Now. The change was instant. All power aboard the Kamarak Null cut out completely. Total darkness. Not just systems failure, but an artificial void. Emergency generators refused to ignite. Backup lights blinked once and died. Security drones froze mid-patrol. Grav stabilizers flickered off, sending crew members weightless into panic. But Nox? He walked. The locks on his cell disengaged with a soft hiss. The door slid open. No alarms blared. No sirens screamed. He stepped out into the corridor like a man taking a morning stroll. 2 guards floated helplessly, fumbling for their shock lances. He reached them in a breath and struck with elegance, using their own inertia against them. One he knocked unconscious with a redirected kick. The other he disabled with his elbow, taking the lance mid-spin and turning it on the nearest wall. It discharged, shorting out a security camera in a burst of sparks. In the ship's command center. Chaos reigned. Containment breach. Human subject has escaped. How? Powers down. Nothing should function. Threx stood rigid in the middle of the shouting. No, he whispered. Everything he needs is functioning. And then the screen lit up again, unbidden, unsummoned with the insignia of a forgotten era, the twin eagle sigil of the Terran vanguard. A voice crackled through the static. It wasn't Nox's. It was older, deeper, artificial. Revenant-class operator confirmed. Commander Nox, welcome back. The I wasn't on the ship. It was in orbit. Buried in the moon, once thought to be a dead hunk of rock, was a Terran military relay, a dormant intelligence core, paired with a failed deadman satellite net. The Zarkethi had ignored it, assuming it was geological debris. But they hadn't understood what Earth had done in its final days. It didn't destroy its weapons. It hid them. Across orbit, in stealth arrays, ancient satellites awoke. Each bore quantum-fed kinetic spears, programmed with battlefield heuristics generations ahead of anything Zarkethi ever deployed. As they emerged from hibernation, they began painting targets, including the Zarkethi dreadnoughts. The Dominion still had time. Barely. Fleet Marshal Arax ordered an immediate retreat to lunar distance. Too late. From the far side of Earth, a glimmer. erupted like a sunrise blooming from space. Then came the light. The kinetic spear from the moon-based platform didn't explode. It didn't need to. It moved at 28 kilometers per second, forged from neutron-dense alloys unknown to modern science, carrying enough force to crack a small moon. It hit Arax's flagship mid-core. The dreadnought split in two, then four, then dust, scattering into Earth's gravity, well, like metallic confetti. The fleet broke. Nox reached the command deck of the Arac Null just as artificial gravity returned. Zarkathi crew turned to face him, some drawing weapons, others frozen. He stepped through the smoke and said only, "You came here for relics. Mistook us for memories. But Earth doesn't leave ghosts." He raised the shock lance, overcharged it in one twist, and hurled it into the core control panel. Sparks danced. Alarms finally returned. But they weren't Zarkathi alarms anymore. They were Terran, and in their native language, one simple phrase. Repeated. Protocol Grendel. Awakened. Begin global sequence. In that moment, the Zarkathi realized the truth. They hadn't discovered a lost civilization. They'd triggered its resurrection. The sky over Earth was no longer silent. Across the planet, dormant Terran defense systems groaned to life beneath centuries of frost and ruin. In the ruins of Johannesburg, a long-dead satellite uplink flickered and sent a coded pulse into orbit. From the Mariana Trench, a submerged relay node began broadcasting encrypted telemetry. Deep beneath the Siberian tundra, under rock and ancient military bunkers, engines whirred. Maglocks released. Vaults unsealed. Humanity's extinction had been a story the stars told to comfort themselves. It had never been true. Above it all, in the bridge of the Arac Null, the Zarkathi finally realized they were not holding a prisoner. They were holding a general. And he had already turned the war around them. Gravitic interference expanding beyond expected limits. One of the surviving bridge officers shouted. "Weapon platforms ours are being overridden. Override how?" Threx barked. The officer's fingers danced across his holopad, panic making them clumsy. Terran subroutines, adaptive ones, are replicating inside our systems. It's not just hacking, it's learning. Every time we block a signal, it forks, rewrites, grows. Cut all outgoing comms, hard shut. Full isolation, Threx commanded, but the command system didn't respond. Instead, the ship's internal display flickered to a new message in red. Terran glyphs. You taught your machines to serve. We taught ours to remember. Nox watched it all from the edge of the bridge, his eyes drinking in the chaos. He had changed since his revival. Not visibly. Physically, he still looked like a man molded by war, veins like cables, muscles like ropes coiled under pale skin. But there was a light behind his gaze now. A connection. He was speaking with the ghosts of Earth's greatest weapons. And they were listening. The Zarkathi, masters of logical war, now faced something that shouldn't exist, a civilization that had turned extinction into camouflage. The Dominion had strategies for rebellion, civil collapse, even multi-front galactic warfare. But they had no strategy for a people who had designed their own defeat as bait. Nox took one step forward. Threx aimed a plasma pistol at him with steady hands. Despite everything, the High Ordinator's voice remained calm. You will not leave this ship, Terran. Nox smiled and pointed at the viewscreen. I already left. The bridge windows flared white. Outside, in low orbit, Earth's hidden legacy had revealed itself. Project Grendel, a Terran planetary defense swarm launched fully for the first time in 600 years. It wasn't a fleet. It was a tactic, encoded into hardware. Hundreds of kinetic platforms and laser lances emerged from stealth orbits, wrapped in radar-disrupting alloys, invisible until they fired. Their targets weren't just military. They were strategic, communication nodes, fleet rally points, Dominion subspace anchors. One by one, the Zarkathi orbital advantage shattered like glass under hammers. Worse still, Humanity had left behind not just weapons, but instructions. The old systems hadn't gone dormant, they'd gone underground. They had absorbed time, adapted, evolved. Dominion algorithms relied on static assumptions. Terran defense AI lived by the philosophy of escalation. If detected, adapt. If compromised, rewrite. If attacked, retaliate with exponential force. Above the moon, the second phase of Grendel began. 5 sleeper platforms, disguised as asteroids in irregular lunar orbit, began unfolding like iron flowers. Each deployed a massive ringed weapon, long believed theoretical, zero-momentum rail lances. Silent, sleek, and terrifyingly fast. They didn't fire at ships. They fired through them. Each shot a needle of molten metal accelerated to fractions of light speed, impossible to detect before impact. Entire sections of the Dominion fleet vanished. No explosions, no debris. Just gaps in formations and panicked chatter. Threx turned back to Nox, something bordering on disbelief in his alien eyes. Why? He asked. Why would your people build this? This graveyard of war? Who were you preparing for? Nox walked forward slowly, past collapsed support struts and flickering lights, his boots echoing against the steel. Everyone. He tapped the wall next to a holo terminal. It responded with a flicker of blue and an old Terran logo. TSD Terran. Strategic Defense Force. Then a voice spoke, not Nox's, but a recorded one from long ago. Female, tired, resolute. If you're hearing this, Earth has fallen. We are not extinct. We are dormant. These systems are not weapons. They are warnings. They are proof. We never surrendered. We never will. Nox turned back to Threx. We left ourselves behind on purpose. To see who would come looking. To see who would try to pick our bones. In desperation, the Zarkathi launched a new strategy. Override the Terran relics with brute force data storms, electromagnetic saturation, and precision jamming. They deployed Code Warriors AI entities bred for counter-intrusion. They lasted 0.6 seconds. The Terran systems didn't fight them, they absorbed them, fed them to their evolving structure like a carnivorous network. Each attack only taught the system more. Earth's ghosts were hungry, and knowledge was meat. Desperate to prevent full planetary lockdown, Dominion Command ordered a final ground incursion. Drop troops directly onto Earth's surface. Seize the central Arctic vault that began it all. And disable the core manually. They never made it. The first wave of dropships entered atmosphere with no resistance. For a moment, it almost seemed to work until they reached 10 kilometers from the surface. Then the sky shimmered. Dozens of Terran air denial drones rose from glaciers like metallic wraiths. They flew with the agility of living things, deploying microsat charges that exploded not with fire, but electromagnetic implosion. Entire battalions disappeared mid-descent. Their ships turned into clouds of molten data and memory. And above it all, Nox watched. On the Kmorak null, he accessed one last program. One he had waited to activate since his first breath in the sarcophagus. He entered a final code into the terminal. Helix Rising. Command Auth KNX01. Confirm. The screen flickered once. Then displayed a list of names. Hundreds. Thousands. Each marked with a location. Each followed by a single word. Revival. Possible. He turned to Threx, who now sat collapsed against the wall, defeated. Staring at him not as a prisoner, but as a storm they had foolishly unbottled. You wanted to know what made us different, Nox said softly. It wasn't our weapons, it was our will. You buried one of us. But we buried many. And now Earth was waking up, all of it. Asterisk far below the chaos in orbit, beneath layers of glacial ice and the bones of old continents, the world began to tremble. The Arctic vault, the same subterranean chamber, where Nox had first drawn breath after centuries of silence, was no longer dormant. Its walls, once dim with residual power, now pulsed with the rhythm of a beating heart. Lights flowed like liquid through conduits. Subterranean turbines groaned awake for the first time in 600 years. And in the heart of the vault, massive, vertical capsules, 7 meters tall and rimmed with frozen steel, began to stir. Each capsule bore a name, not carved, not printed, but encoded in light, dancing along the seams like fireflies in a storm. Unit Ares, Unit Talia, Unit Malik, Unit Nakamura, Unit Soul. The Iron Choir had begun to sing again, up in orbit, aboard the shattered remains of the K-Morak Null. Nox stood with arms folded as Dominion escape pods broke formation and fled. They no longer aimed for Earth. They aimed away from it, desperate to escape the gravity well of a planet that now felt less like a corpse and more like a predator. Aboard one of those fleeing ships, High Ordinator Threk sat in silence. He had ordered Earth classified as a non-threat, had written the official reports, planet sterile, cultural artifacts valuable, species extinct. He now watched from a fractured viewport as history rewrote itself in real time. No species should come back like this, he murmured. Beside him, a younger Zarkathi trembled. Sir, what if there are more? Threx didn't respond, because he already knew. Nox watched from what remained of the bridge as orbital scans updated with terrifying speed. Across Earth's surface, thermal blooms flared from ancient installations, bunkers, mega-factories, old skyports. Some were in ruins, but others had merely waited, as if the Earth itself had agreed to sleep, waiting for the one signal to wake. Grendel was just the beginning. The Iron Choir had been Earth's last war protocol before the fall, a union of humanity's greatest generals and strategists, digitized, enhanced, and embedded into biomechanical warframes. Each one was a living memory of warfare and willpower. And now they were being reborn. From the Arctic vault, the first of them stepped forward. Unit Ares emerged like a god from myth, 8 feet of obsidian armor and red-lit eyes. His voice, a choir of harmonized male and female tones. He stepped onto the icy floor with a weight that cracked the stone, then turned toward the sunrise. Protocol Helix Rising confirmed, he said to no one, yet all could hear. Initiating Continental Awakening. Others followed. Unit Talia, shaped like a dancer but armored like a tank, activated orbital signal intercepts, catching Dominion command calls and feeding them into Earth's counterstrike net. Unit Nakamura launched an old skyhook hidden in the Himalayas, re-establishing Terran SATCOMs. Unit Sol quiet, masked, and burning with internal plasma, spoke just once. Enemies detected within 4:0, requesting permission to engage at maximum range. Nox's voice answered, beamed down from orbit. Granted. Sol's inner core pulsed like a dying star. A buried artillery platform on the Pacific seabed turned and rose, shedding coral and kelp like the skin of a leviathan. It launched a projectile into the void. 60 minutes later, a Dominion cruiser on approach from the Saturn outpost went dark. No explosion, no signal, just gone. Panic gripped the Dominion. On every colony world, Terran artifacts were reassessed. What once were trophies became feared remnants. Items once displayed in museums were quarantined. Some Dominion scientists attempted to destroy them. Most failed. Some were killed in the attempt by mechanisms no longer understood. The realization was no longer theoretical. Humanity had never been wiped out. They had chosen to vanish. And now they had chosen to return. The second twist came not from Earth, but from the stars. Somewhere in the Lyton system, 12.4 light years from Sol, a Dominion recon vessel encountered something impossible. A Terran vessel. Sleek, silent, functional. It hailed them in perfect Dominion dialect. Introduced itself as the TSV Providence. The crew aboard spoke calmly, clearly like diplomats. But there was something wrong. They knew too much about the Dominion, about its structure, its wars, its weaknesses. The Providence then broadcast a signal, a command phrase in an ancient Terran dead language. And hundreds of hidden satellites throughout the system came online. The Dominion wasn't just losing Earth. They had never truly held the galaxy. The human fallback plan had been far bigger than any could have imagined. They hadn't just buried themselves on Earth. They had scattered across the stars. Generation ships disguised as comets, habitats hidden inside moons, vaults on Mars, drones seeded into planetary cores. The Terran mindset wasn't just about vengeance, it was about continuity. About ensuring that, should one ember of humanity survive, it would reignite the fire. Nox watched this unfold on the K-Morak Nul's remains. Now fully under his control, he didn't look victorious. He looked focused. Beside him, Unit Ares stood silently, massive arms crossed behind his back. They're scattering, Ares observed. Running to the fringes, Nox nodded. Let them. They'll tell others what they saw. Ares tilted his head. Should we pursue? Nox looked out over the wounded planet below. Not yet. Not until we're ready. They thought we were. A memory. Let them whisper that we are legends. Far beyond Earth, the Dominion's Central Command Corps in the Soronak system issued an emergency level galactic broadcast. Do not approach Sol system. Do not engage Terran entities. Cease all excavation of human ruins. They are not extinct. They are not broken. And they will not stop. The war hadn't ended. It had just begun. And in every dark corner of the galaxy, the Iron Choir stirred, their voices rising in harmony. Awaken the sleeper. Sound the cry. Let the stars remember why they feared the Earth. Asterisk space was no longer quiet. It groaned with the awakening of something ancient, something patient. Across the Sol system, Dominion warships burned, shattered, or vanished in silence. The debris field stretched from lunar orbit to the edge of Mars' exosphere, twisted remnants of vessels that had once been symbols of galactic domination. What remained of the Dominion's pride was now drifting wreckage, carved by hypervelocity Terran weapons older than their civilization. On Earth, blue and white beneath veils of cloud had become a beacon again, not of peace, but of reckoning. Nox stood aboard the reactivated orbital command platform designated Watchtower 1, a relic from the age of departure that had re-entered operational status without a single human technician lifting a hand. Around him, Terran defense eyes swarmed like spirits, silent, efficient, unified. Holograms lit the war room with a synchronized ballet of data, orbital trajectories, heat maps, projected Dominion fallback points, and hundreds of tagged human revival capsules now glowing with green status lights. Behind him, the Iron Choir had assembled. Ares, Sol, Talia, Nakamura, and Malik, each a legend reborn, each forged in the crucible of Earth's final war. Their armor hummed with power far beyond what any living soldier should have wielded. But they were no longer mere soldiers. They were avatars of humanity's intent, curators of vengeance, guardians of legacy. A holographic Zarkathi projection bloomed above the table. Malik spoke first. Voice deep, surgical. Final Dominion Fleet Group. 2 dreadnoughts, 7 cruisers, 36 interceptors. Holding at Lagrange Point 4, stalling. They're waiting for reinforcements, Sol said, calm and unreadable. We won't give them the chance. Nox nodded. Agreed. Begin Operation Skybreak. And like that, the final act of Earth's rebirth began. The Dominion knew it was a trap, but pride demanded action. Across the fleet, commanders relayed what little intelligence remained. The humans had technological ghosts, sleeper weapons, war artifacts, powered by impossible logic. None of it made sense by galactic standards. They didn't understand the full spectrum of the threat, only that it was escalating beyond what the Dominion had ever faced. And yet, they advanced. Because to retreat meant admitting that Earth, a dead world, had beaten them. Again, the trap snapped shut with terrifying precision. At precisely 4 o'clock Seoul Standard Time, a Terran signal burst from Watchtower 1, piggybacked through every Dominion sensor drone. For 4.7 seconds, their targeting systems displayed false data, illusory ships, inverted heat maps, gravity shadows where none should be. Their fleet AI tried to correct, but the correction was the weapon. Embedded in the false data was a command chain code so elegantly viral it reprogrammed the targeting subroutines to lock on their own ships. The first Dominion cruiser fired its plasma array directly into the belly of its sister vessel. What followed was a cacophony of chaos, human stealth. Drones, previously invisible, began decloaking like demons pulled from a veil. Each deployed microswarm payloads, thousands of self-guided warheads the size of wasps, moving too fast for interception. Hulls vented atmosphere, engines ruptured. Pilots died without knowing how they'd been hit. At the center of the Terran formation, the choir advanced in formation, flying without vessels. Their bodies had been re-engineered for hard vacuum and zero-G combat. They moved like thoughts, instantaneous, surgical, unstoppable. Ares broke through the first line of interceptors, landing on the hull of a Zarkathi battleship. He tore into its armor with his bare hands, ripped open the bridge dome, and flooded it with null gas. As the command crew convulsed in vacuum, he planted a beacon spike, then launched away as the ship folded in half from a precision orbital strike. Moments later, Talia moved through the wreckage with terrifying grace, dancing between bursts of fire like a storm made flesh. Every motion translated into destruction. Her embedded microblades skittered across hulls and left boiling metal behind. She didn't kill indiscriminately, she chose her targets, eliminating command structures with the elegance of an artist. Nakamura and Malik coordinated deep system countermeasures, weaponizing captured Dominion comms to feed false orders across their ranks. Dominion ships collided, formation leaders abandoned posts under illusion, and AI decision loops spiraled into recursive madness. In Soul waited. He descended only when the final dreadnought activated its warp core overload. The Zarkathi, intended to destroy the battlefield in one final act of defiance, but Soul intercepted the energy surge mid-charge. His warframe absorbed the rising quantum flux, feeding it into a magnetic siphon embedded in his chest. It glowed with sickening heat, then released in a single beam a lance of absolute power that pierced the dreadnought's heart and silenced it forever. 50 Dominion ships had entered Earth's sky, only 3 fled, and of those, none dared broadcast. None dared explain, because how could they? How could they describe what they'd seen? Humans flying without ships, armor that sang in dead languages, weapons that knew names. Back aboard Watchtower 1, silence returned. Tactical feeds calmed. Threat alerts dimmed. Earth was sovereign again. Nox looked out over the blue sphere slowly turning below them. Not at the planet, but at what it had done, what it had hidden, what it had preserved. He pressed a palm to the console. Report, he said. Ares stepped forward. Dominion fleets retreating across all Sol adjacent sectors. Reinforcements. Rerouted. Subspace chatter indicates panic. Earth is no longer seen as a target. Nox looked to the others. Casualties? 0, said Sol. Just one malfunction. Nox raised an eyebrow. We ran out of targets, Sol finished. The room was quiet for a long moment. Then Nox leaned against the edge of the console, arms folded. They'll be back, Talia said. Yes, he agreed. But next time they'll bring fear with them. Malik cracked his knuckles. Let them. They'll bring friends too. Nox allowed himself a small smile. They'll need them. And from deep within Earth, far beneath the roots of its mountains and oceans, hundreds of cryovos continued to hum. More Terrans, more warriors, more legends waiting, not to invade, not to conquer, but to remind the stars why the last time they warred with humanity was also the last time they ever tried. The stars whispered now, not in joy or wonder, but in quiet, nervous awe, across the Dominion's farthest colonies, from the crystal towers of Sendikar to the oceanic spires of Valoon Prime. Broadcasts shifted overnight. The propaganda once glorifying Earth's conquest went silent. Educational systems deleted sections on Terran anthropology. Memorials to the fall of humanity were quietly dismantled. Curators removed Terran relics from museums, not because they were worthless, but because they were listening. The stars remembered. And they were afraid. In the central chamber of the Zarkathi High Assembly, 12 Dominion species gathered in a closed session, their holographic visages flickering as static bled into even their secured channels. Audio distortion. System lag. Nothing the engineers could stop. Terran signal noise. Always present. Always pulsing beneath the surface. High Ordinator Threk stood before the chamber, a hollow echo of the commander he once was. His body still bore the scorch marks from the Kamorak Null's last moments. His voice was slow, measured, stripped of arrogance. "You asked for my report," he said. "You will not like it." No one interrupted. Earth is no longer a planet. It is a protocol. A strategy. A message written in war and frozen in time until we were foolish enough to read it. A Zavanti delegate hissed. "They were extinct. They were dormant," Threk snapped. "They let us think we won. They made extinction a disguise." He paused. "They baited us." Murmurs swept the chamber. One archivist from the Yevon Clade accessed Forbidden's pre-fall records. Terran myths, legends, whispers of Project Helix, of the Iron Choir, of Grendel, all dismissed as exaggerations. Until now. Until the myths began responding to pings. Meanwhile, back in the Sol system, Earth had changed. The skies above the planet were no longer unguarded. Orbital defense arrays floated like thorns around a sleeping giant. Terran battlecruisers, not rebuilt, but awakened, patrolled the gravity wells of Mars and Luna. Terran AI hummed inside quantum cores, quietly indexing every Dominion movement. Within 5 light years. But the greatest change was not in weapons or strategy. It was in hope. Across Earth's surface, humanity emerged from vaults, cryopods, and hidden sanctuaries. Survivors of an apocalypse they had orchestrated. They stepped into the sunlight with awe, their first breaths of open air in centuries, filled with cold wind and starlight. Children who had never seen the sky, veterans who had watched it burn. They walked on old bones and new soil, among the ruins of skyscrapers and the sprouting of green. Reclamation crews, human and machine alike, rebuilt infrastructure with terrifying speed. They weren't just restoring Earth. They were rearming it. In the Arctic vault, Commander Knox watched from the balcony of a command tower. The Iron Choir stood behind him, silent, alert. But this moment was not theirs. It was his. Below, crowds gathered. Survivors, soldiers, second-gen colonists, revived engineers and scientists. Entire families reunited after centuries in artificial slumber. They didn't cheer. They simply looked up at him expectant. Ready. Knox stepped to the edge of the platform, voice amplified not by speakers, but by Terran resonance arrays embedded in the structure itself. It wasn't just sound. It was feeling, carried like thunder across skin and bone. "We were erased," he said, voice calm. "Not by an enemy, by design. We chose silence. We chose sleep. Because we knew the galaxy would not welcome us. Because we knew we were not done." He let the silence hang. "They came for our bones. They thought we were relics. They thought we were safe to plunder. And they were wrong." A rumble passed through the crowd, not applause, not noise, just presence. A shared breath. A shared awakening. Knox nodded. Double quotes. "Now they know. Now they run." But this is not revenge. This is not conquest. This is clarity. We will not be scavenged. We will not be buried. We will not fade. He raised his hand, gesturing to the horizon. Our world has changed. But so has our role. We are no longer one planet. We are a warning. To every empire that thinks strength is measured in control. To every fleet that forgets the cost of pride. Let them remember Earth. His final words echoed like a storm. Let them remember why the stars once feared the dark. Months passed. Humanity did not expand recklessly. No invasion fleets, no wild colonization. Instead, Earth established the Sol Protocol, a defensive radius extending 6 light years in every direction. Any unauthorized entry was greeted not with communication, but with silence. And silence was worse. Terran scout ships ventured into old colonies, some long since fallen. Survivors there wept to see them. Entire exiled bloodlines reconnected. Earth's voice reached its children again, not as ruler, not as empire, but as home. The galaxy did not declare war again. The Dominion remained intact, but fractured. Many races within it began sending quiet envoys to Sol, not to bargain, but to learn. Terran knowledge, though not freely given, was shared with caution. And what those diplomats found was unexpected. Humans laughed. They planted gardens. They wrote poetry. They told stories to children who had never heard music before. They remembered. The fear was not in what humans did next, that it was in what they could have done, and chose not to. And in deep space, past the edge of Dominion charts, in forgotten systems where strange signals still roamed, Terran beacons pulsed. One by one, a single message repeating, in every known tongue, every galactic code, every quantum frequency. We are awake. We are watching. We are waiting.